Hello, and welcome to today's video where we're going to be talking about, is it possible that one of the reasons why we may be experiencing depression in our lives, experiencing a feeling that our life has very little meaning or purpose, or feeling like we're very uninspired, or like we have very little motivation, or we don't know really why we're doing what we're doing, or we don't really see the point in anything. Is it possible that that can be caused by self-suppression or self-rejection or self-hate? And again, we want to understand that there is no one singular cause of any mental health issue. Okay? So before we even go anywhere with this conversation, I am not a licensed health or mental health care practitioner. I am someone who has worked with people for a very, very long time. I've done a lot of research. I have a lot of experience. And so that is the lens through which I am speaking. But this is not meant to diagnose. This is not meant to be a one-size-fits-all for all people, because that does not exist. And if you are dealing with depression, of course, I am always going to suggest that you get one-on-one help, okay? We are complex individuals. We are complex beings. And that means there is no amount of just general advice, generally speaking, that is going to be the answer for us, all right? General advice is meant to be something that we take in to help us inform ourselves, to help us become a little bit clearer, to help us ask ourselves some questions. And general advice can be helpful, and it can help us change our lives, and it can help us make different decisions. And also, sometimes we need one-on-one help. Sometimes we need medication. Sometimes we need intervention. Sometimes the one-on-one help isn't enough for what we're dealing with. And I really want to just be mindful and respectful about that, okay? So we need to understand that nothing that is said in this video is meant to be diagnosing or saying that if you experience this, this is absolutely why, and this is exactly what you should do about it. And I promise you that if this is what you do, it will heal everything, because I don't know you. I don't know your specific situation. I'm not your licensed healthcare practitioner. I am giving general advice, okay? So just take everything with a grain of salt. Take everything, weigh it against your experience, weigh it against what feels real for you, what does not feel real for you, and of course, run it by the people who know you and who know your specific situation, because that is very important. Okay? So 2 comments here. Depression is suppression or not accepting certain emotion. For example, cheating or lying since childhood. It could be. Okay? So we're going to get into that. And then yes, depression can be caused by self-rejection. Working on it, haha. Yes, okay. So, with what we're talking about today, can depression be caused by self-rejection? The answer to that question is, of course, generally, yes. If we are living a life where we are constantly hating ourselves, where we are constantly assuming the worst about ourselves, where we are constantly assuming that we are not capable, that we are not worthy of love, that we are not good enough, that we don't know how to handle situations, if we are living a life where we don't feel like we can put up boundaries and speak up for ourselves and ask for what we want and ask for what we need and have those things given to us in caring and respectful ways, if we feel like who we are fundamentally is not good, is not worthy of love, is something that constantly needs to be fixed, changed, improved upon, you can imagine, right? If we just take a step back and think about that logically, I think all of us can imagine how deeply that constant self-talk and that constant not liking yourself can lead to feelings of life not meaning anything, feeling exhausted, feeling like everything is really hard and there's no point to anything, feeling like life sucks. Because even just that alone, if it didn't impact our actions, if it didn't impact the things that we did, which it will and it does, and the whole cascade of that we're going to talk about, even if that was just what was going on in our minds and it had no impact on the outside world, that would still be completely draining of our energy all the time. Okay? And we have to understand that we live in a world today where most of us do think that way about ourselves. Right? Where most of us, if we were really to interrogate our thoughts and the way that we view ourselves, most of us do not walk around, number one, with the assumption that we are capable of figuring out challenges. And that if things shift and change or don't go how we expect them to go, that we can figure it out, that we can work it out, and that we can learn, grow, and adapt in a way that we can keep ourselves safe. Right? Many of us are walking around feeling like we are constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop, or like if something changes, we're not going to be okay. We're looking at the external environment and seeing threat all the time. And again, rather than feeling like, okay, even if those things happen, or even if something shifts, or even if something changes, I can figure it out, we tend to feel like, then I'm screwed. And that is a level of self-hate and self-rejection. Right? It's not seeing ourselves as our adult selves who can adjust and adapt and learn and grow and be okay. It's seeing ourselves as incapable. And that is part of not loving yourself, right? Which is very exhausting and can make life feel terrible. Okay? I want to ease my attitude towards the unknown. Yes. And this is what we're going to talk about here today. Next thing is many of us walk around, so that feeling that I am incapable. That idea that if something were to happen and if something changes, I can't figure it out. I can't do it. I'm all alone. I have no resources. That's exhausting. And that is a level of self-rejection. Number 2, many of us walk around believing that all of our pain that we are experiencing is our fault on some level. That we are causing it by being bad, wrong, shameful, guilty, not enough, too much. We are the problem and we need to fix ourselves. So rather than being able to have compassion for ourselves when we are feeling sad, when we are angry, when we are experiencing things that are difficult or challenging, rather than being able to be on our own side, rather than being able to comfort ourselves or to support ourselves or nourish ourselves and then lead into problem solving or whatever it is that we need to do, we automatically jump into self-rejection. What am I doing wrong? What's wrong with me? How am I the cause of this? Why am I so broken? What do I need to fix about myself? And that is exhausting for 2 reasons. First reason is that's like literally having an inner critic, inner parent that's constantly berating and beating you up. That's an inner bully. You see? That level of self-rejection. I am in pain, and we jump straight to what's wrong with me? What am I doing wrong? How am I the cause of this? How do I need to fix myself? That's exhausting. That does not feel good. That's not comforting. That's not usually what we need when we are in a situation where we are not feeling good. Yes? And then the second reason that's exhausting is because it does not help us connect to real reality. It actually does not help us problem solve. It does not help us identify the true cause of why we are feeling the pain that we're feeling. And therefore, what steps we can take in real reality to move towards something that feels better. It keeps us trapped in a cycle of constant self-blame and shame, of constantly looking for what's wrong with me, that I am causing this, that I am the reason for this. And most of the time, our pain and the things that we are going through in life are not that simple. They don't just boil down to, there's something wrong with me and I need to change and fix myself. And if I did that, everything would be perfect. In real reality, that's almost never the actual situation. And therefore, we are constantly stuck in a state of pain because we can't figure out what the actual reason is. We can't figure out where our actual power is. We're spending all of our time either just hating and berating ourselves, or all of our time trying to fix and change ourselves. And when that is not the problem, that is not the cause of pain, we stay in pain and we're putting forth all this effort to try to get out of pain, and it doesn't work. It doesn't get us anywhere. And that usually then just reinforces the self-hate. That just says, right, I'm not changing enough, I'm not doing enough, I'm not fixing myself enough. And therefore, that is clearly why I'm staying in pain, instead of being able to be like, maybe that's not the problem. But right, instead, it continues to say, no, see, I'm not fixing it enough. That's why I'm still in pain. I'm clearly right about this. This is obviously the problem. And if I had been able to fix myself, the pain would have gone away. But I haven't been able to fix myself. I haven't been able to make myself perfect because, newsflash, almost the entire time we are trying to fix ourselves from this vantage point, we are going to be failing. Right? Most of us have experienced that. That we have been fighting with and arguing with and trying to fix and change ourselves for as long as we can remember. And we've never been able to successfully make those changes. So we always have this thing that we can blame on ourselves and say, this is the reason. If I could just fix this, all of my pain would go away. Because we're never able to actually fix the thing. So it continues to be there as the scapegoat, the thing we can always blame our pain on, the thing we can always point to and say, that is the reason I don't feel good. Forever and ever and ever and ever. And it never fixes the pain. And we continue to just put forth all this effort to try and fix and change ourselves. And it never works because that's usually not the issue. And then how we're going about trying to fix and change ourselves usually doesn't work because it's coming from a place of self-hate. And it's this self-reinforcing cycle that is exhausting. And so we are stuck in pain. We're continually trying to change it and fix it. We're not able to. And we're hating ourselves the whole time. So you can see, again, how that would be double draining. Yeah? Okay. When I can't find the source of pain outside, I go inside of body and checking feet where are they standing on. Yeah, absolutely. Coming into presence is a really good thing. Okay. Next thing. When we are in a place of self-rejection, when we are in a place where we are assuming we are fundamentally not good, not worthy of love, not fundamentally a good person, we are constantly going to be in a state of fear. And fear is a very stressful place to be. We are constantly going to be in a state of feeling like the other shoe is going to drop, I'm not going to be safe, even if I have safety right now, even if things seem okay right now, even if I can come into the present moment and see that I'm fine right now, it doesn't matter. Because that could all fall apart in any minute, right? partner could leave me. My parents could decide that they hate me and then I don't have support anymore. I could get fired from my job tomorrow. We all have these fears when we hate ourselves this much. That love, safety, provision could go away at any moment. That our worlds could just get turned upside down at any moment. We don't feel safe. We don't feel secure. And we're able to look out at the world, which is continually insecure to a degree. And we're able to catastrophize and assume the worst and be fearful that the worst thing is always about to happen to us. Right? We go to the worst case scenario situation over and over and over again, constantly feeling like that is what is happening, right? Like our bodies are literally responding as though that threat is currently happening. And that is exhausting. That does not feel good. And that blocks us from being able to experience the joy of the moments that we're in. When we are in that state of stress and in that state of fear, I am not worthy of love, I am not good enough. Therefore, anything that is secure is not really secure. It could go away at any moment. I am not going to be safe. And then I'm not going to be able to figure it out. And anything could just, fall apart at the drop of a hat. That makes us scared all the time. That means that we are literally going to be looking for threat, even where threat doesn't exist. We're going to be seeing threat where threat doesn't exist. We're going to be worrying about all these things that we have no control over, that we are not able to take any steps towards because they aren't actually happening. But we're going to be living and feeling as though they are, right? And so, like I say, and then this shuts down our capacity to experience the joy and the lightness and the good things that are happening right now. Because when we're in that state of fear, we're like, no, I have to stay on alert. I have to stay on guard. I can't let my guard down. I can't allow myself to relax or to be still or to enjoy anything. Because then if something bad happens, I'm not ready. I'm not braced. I'm not on alert. And that is exhausting. And then that makes life feel like nothing matters and we're just going from task to task to task to task. Right? That I am not worthy of love, I am not good enough, therefore I am not going to be safe connection is something that I think we are missing in so much of our mental health talk. When we genuinely feel like we are not worthy of love, we are going to feel continually like the world is going to fall apart. Because from the very beginning of our lives, right? We all know this. If you've been listening to my videos for a while, you'll be able to say this along with me. From the very beginning of our lives, we learned in that initial temporary codependent relationship we had with our caregivers that love and being loved by someone outside of us equaled them providing for us, and that their presence and their attention and their love and their empathy towards us equaled getting our needs met. And therefore the opposite was also true. We perceived in our childhood bodies, in our childhood selves, that when love goes away from caregivers, when love goes away from authority figures, when love goes away from our peers, that we don't have the capacity to provide for ourselves. We don't have the capacity to problem solve, to do all of these things that we can now do as adults. We couldn't do that as children. So to us, love going away deep in the body feels like safety goes away. So when we are constantly in a state of not liking ourselves, we are then constantly triggered into this state of fear and that the other shoe is about to drop and we are not okay, and we are not going to be safe, and what if this happens, and what if that happens, and what if this goes wrong, and what if that goes wrong, right? So the less we have that secure connection within ourselves, that secure connection that says, no matter what happens, I'm going to be here for me, and I love me, and I'm on my own side, the more we have that, I am not worthy of love, I am not good enough, I need to change, I need to fix myself, I'm broken, the more we feel that, the more we're triggered into a state of feeling like my needs aren't going to get met, and I'm not going to be safe, and I'm not going to be okay. You see? Because there's such a deep nervous system correlation between rejection and not having our needs met. So when we are constantly rejecting ourselves, we are going to be constantly feeling like our needs aren't being met, and we're not going to get our needs met, or even if they're being met right now, it's all going to go away any moment, because that's what our nervous systems feel like. Okay? And then finally, when we are in a state of self-rejection, when we are hating ourselves, well, I guess not finally, I have two more. Number one is, this means we are never going to be able to figure out the things that bring us joy in life. When we are in a constant state of self-rejection, we can't learn about the things that actually matter to us. We can't make space for figuring out the things that are going to actually fulfill us as unique individuals on this planet. We are going to be living our lives for the approval of caregivers, for the approval of authority figures, for the approval of culture and conditioning, and everything is going to be external. We're going to be wondering what people think about us all the time. We're going to be worrying about other people's opinions of us all the time. We're going to be doing things that we don't actually want to be doing because we're just so afraid of rejection, that is the worst thing ever, that we don't know how to set boundaries, we don't know how to say no, we don't know how to say yes to the things that actually matter to us, we don't know how to confidently do the things that matter to us if other people don't validate it. And then we are constantly living a life that isn't ours. We are living a life that isn't ours. We are doing things not because we want to do them, or because it's interesting to us, or because it matters to us, or because it aligns with our value system, or because it fulfills us on any level. We are just doing it because we don't want to be rejected. And that is incredibly draining. And again, when we live a life like that, you can see how that would be depressing. You can see how that would be shitty, right? And then last thing is, when we are in a state of self-rejection, we are also going to be in a state of resisting and rejecting our true emotional responses to life. Instead of being able to say, hey, I'm hurt, please don't speak to me that way. Instead of being able to say, I'm sad, or I'm angry, or this is how I feel joy about this, I feel excited about this, we aren't going to be able to process our emotions effectively and truthfully. When we are in a state of self-rejection and self-hate, we generally are in a state where we are telling ourselves, I shouldn't feel this way. I'm just complaining. I should be grateful. I should change myself when someone is mean to me, or when someone oversteps my boundary, or when someone tells me that I owe them this, or I should be doing that, or I shouldn't be doing this, and all of this. We aren't able to say, well, no, that's not real for me. Or, hey, you hurt my feelings. Or, hey, you shouldn't be behaving in this way. It wasn't about my reaction or the thing that I said or making myself perfect. I'm angry. I'm sad. You overstepped a boundary. We aren't going to be able to advocate for ourselves. We aren't going to be able to process our emotions and figure out what our emotions are trying to tell us and how we need to move forward in life. And then we are going to be stuck. Right? So for all of these reasons, absolutely, it is very possible that we can be in a state of depression because we are in a state of self-hate and rejection. Does this make sense to everybody? Any questions or concerns before we move on? Because that's the overview, right? We can see how self-rejection could absolutely lead to depression. All right? So greetings from Chile. Learning English from you day after day, seeing and listening to your videos and reading your posts. Many blessings from... Oh, I hope that that's helpful. Thank you for being here, and thank you for listening and reading, and best of luck with your learning your English. And yes, thank you for that comment. That's very kind. Okay, so now, what I want to make clear here is this. Just like I will say in every one of my other videos, none of us choose to hate ourselves. None of us choose to dislike ourselves. None of us just wake up one day and say, I'm going to suppress my emotions. I'm not going to be my true self. I'm not going to like who I am because I just want to mess up my own life. Because I want to be depressed. Because I want to be hurting. Because whatever. Okay? None of us are choosing to hate ourselves, reject ourselves, live with shame, blame, and guilt, deflect our emotions, not validate ourselves. None of us are choosing that. That is something we learned to do in our childhoods when we were shamed, blamed, rejected, criticized, and ridiculed, abandoned by the people we depended upon for everything. Self-hate is a protective mechanism that we took on in our early years of life when we had no other problem-solving capacity, when we were in that codependent relationship with our caregivers and the world around us, when we were not able to exert our own power and to figure out our own problems and to provide for ourselves. That is where self-rejection came from. Okay? It is a coping mechanism that we took on to try to protect ourselves. The parts of ourselves that we hate, the parts of ourselves that we dislike, the parts of ourselves we are repressing and suppressing and rejecting, are the parts of ourselves we learned we had to suppress, reject, try to get rid of, in order to be loved by our caregivers and the other authority figures and peers in our lives that we perceived were the source of what we needed. We did not have the capacity to understand that sometimes our caregivers were simply incapable, and the reason they weren't providing for us or were rejecting us or were abandoning us or not there for us on some level was because of their own stuff, and it had nothing to do with us. Was because they didn't have access to the things that we needed. Was because they cared about us deeply but just didn't understand. Was because nothing to do with us. We were not able to perceive that sometimes our caregivers abused us and did really horrible things that are absolutely abuse. Not because we deserved it. Not because we did something wrong. Not because we asked for it. Not because our behavior was deserving of that kind of punishment or hurt or harm. But because our caregivers were wrong and should not have done that. We were not able to perceive that when we acted in ways that weren't in alignment with who we truly are, and we got the love and the acceptance and the embracing that we wanted so bad, that long term was going to be bad for us. Right? We learned to pretend to be people we aren't, to pretend that we didn't have boundaries, to say yes, to be people pleasers, because it made life more peaceful for us in the moment of that temporary codependent relationship. It's what we had to do to survive from our perspective. Again, that may not have been true in real reality, right? We may now be able to look back as adults and be like, they were still going to provide for me. I was still going to be okay. That wouldn't have equaled death. But we didn't know that as children. And then that becomes our pattern. That becomes our program. That becomes our MO, our modus operandi. And we live like that for the rest of our lives from an unconscious, subconscious place. And then when we experience pain in our adulthood, most of us, instead of being able to say, okay, what's actually happening? What am I experiencing? Why does it hurt? What's the actual cause? Where am I contributing to it? Where is it not about me? Instead of being able to have that expanded adult perspective, we automatically get nervous system triggered into what did I just do wrong? How is this my fault? And how can I fix myself? Right? And then that leads us into that constant spiral of never being able to figure out what's actually going on, never being able to figure out what our actual needs are, never being able to figure out why we're actually hurting or what we actually need or what would actually make us feel better. And then we get stuck in self-improvement. We get stuck on that, well, if I just improved myself enough, we get stuck in that. We get stuck in that paradigm. We're never able to figure out what's actually happening. We're never able to figure out what's actually hurting. We're never able to move forward in our lives in ways that would actually be productive. And therefore, we stay stuck in pain. We stay stuck in the things that hurt us, that don't feel good. We are not able to fix it. And you can see how that would lead to a life where we feel constantly depressed, where we feel constantly like we don't have energy and we don't feel good because we're not living a life that is in alignment with ourselves. We're not able to figure out what we need and what is good for us, like I've said over and over, okay? So this is why, for some of us, the roots of our depression are coming from self-rejection. And now the remedy for this, of course, is never going to be as simple as just love yourself. Just choose to love yourself. Just choose to stop hating yourself and go live your life the way that you need to live it. Because if it were that simple, if it were that easy, all of us would be doing that. All of us would be doing that already. We all would have just woken up in our 18th birthday and been like, well, I'm an adult now, and I'm fine, and I'm capable, and I can just do things, and it doesn't matter if my caregivers reject me, and it doesn't matter if my friends reject me, and it doesn't matter if society judges me. I'm just going to go do the things that I want to do and live my life and be happy. Right? If that were the case, I wouldn't be here. I would not need to be doing this work. We would not have the mystery school. We would not have one-on-one coaching. We would not have all of these videos. Because if it were that simple, right, we would all be doing it. We would all be doing it. So I want you to understand, again, it is not your fault that you have self-hate and that you have self-rejection. You are not choosing it. You are not broken. There is nothing wrong with you. It is a survival mechanism. It is something you took on to keep yourself safe in a temporary situation where, again, in our childhoods, it probably was life-saving for us. It was better for us to just do and be what our caregivers wanted us to do and be, to reject ourselves so that we would fit in, than it was to fight back, right? Some of us were the sibling that fought back, that decided to be their true self and fight against the caregivers. And if you're going to reject me, I'm going to be myself anyways. I was kind of like that. And it was not pleasant. Let me tell you that. Okay? It wasn't like my caregivers one day turned around and were like, oh, okay, we're sorry. We're being unsupportive. We're being, hateful. We're telling you that your body problems are your fault, and we're telling you that you're being bullied because you're not good enough. And that's bad, and we shouldn't do that, and we're sorry. That never happened. Not until much later in my life. Right? What actually happened was I was getting shit on all over at school. I was getting shit on at home. And then I tried to defend myself, and I got in even more trouble. I got even more rejection. I got even less safety. And it was awful. And my sister watched this, and she was like, hell no. There's no frickin' way. Absolutely no way that I'm gonna be anything my caregivers don't want me to be. There's no way I'm gonna risk that kind of rejection. Because look at how that works out. Look at how threatening that is. Look at how awful that is. I am gonna be the perfect little daughter that never has a problem and never needs anything and is the perfect counselor and all the things that my caregivers wanted her to be. And she destroyed herself. In the long run, it was very, very damaging for her to never learn how to embrace herself and what she needed and what she wanted and what was good for her and what her real emotions were and what she was actually experiencing, right? Her entire perspective became other people and what do I need to do for other people and how do I... And it was very, very heavy and very, very painful. But in our childhoods, in the situation within our household as kids, it was better for her. In that temporary situation, it was way worse for me as someone who couldn't pretend than it was for her as someone who could. So that's the other kind of paradox of this whole thing, is that usually when we're the kind of person who doesn't destroy ourselves for our caregivers and all of this stuff, and I mean, it's not to say that I then didn't grow up still completely hating myself. I did. It was more like I couldn't choose not to be my real self. I just was not good at acting. And so I got in trouble a lot. And so I hated all of these parts of myself, of course, because they were getting me rejected. Right? But at least for my sister, she was able to get some love and acceptance by being a fake version of herself. But then it led her to feeling very much like life doesn't matter and like nothing is real and nothing counts because nothing was real to her. So maybe accepting failing is okay to improve again. No one can do all in the first time. And that's exactly it, right? So that is exactly what I was going to say about this. Is that deep in our nervous systems, we are rejecting ourselves because we believe that is what we need to do in order to be safe. So learning how to shift this, learning how to shift it so that we are no longer in a state of self-rejection, or that we are more able to accept our real emotions. We are more able to come into our adult perspective that says, when I am in pain, I need to look for the actual cause, not just what's wrong with me. That says, I am capable of learning. It's okay to make mistakes. I can mess up. I can experience things that I didn't see coming, and I can figure it out. I'm resilient. I am capable of problem solving. You see? When we start to do these things, it is going to feel like death to our nervous systems. When we start to connect with who we really are and all these parts of ourselves we had to reject in order to be safe in our caregivers' homes. We're not going to just be like, oh, great, this is awesome, connecting with myself. I'm going to go just do and be and express my real nature, and it's going to be great, and la la la. What's actually going to happen is we're going to be like, no, if I do that, I'm going to die. If I am my real self, I will be rejected by everyone. Everyone will hate me, and then I will never be okay. I'll never be able to get a job again. I'll be alone forever. I'll never be able to provide for myself. So then we're stuck in this kind of feeling like we're damned if we do and damned if we don't. We get stuck in this thing of, I don't feel good living this life where I'm codependent, where I'm hyper individualistic and I don't allow anyone to know me or get to know me, and I can't trust anybody, where we're living for the approval of other people versus living for what we actually care about, where we're constantly suppressing our emotions or blaming all of our emotions on ourselves, or in that state of constant self-hate and rejection and therefore trying to fix ourselves and change ourselves all the time. That doesn't feel good. But the flip side of trying not to do those things, trying to be our real selves, trying to actually move forward with expressing ourselves, also feels like we're going to die. It's gonna feel like if I do this, everyone is gonna reject me. I'm gonna be alone forever. There is no point. Because in our nervous systems, that's what we believe. Not necessarily in our minds, right? Our logic and our intellect may be able to say, I'll be okay. I can figure it out. We can get there. Right? But our bodies are going to be like, nope, you're absolutely going to die. Do not do that. That is the most dangerous, worst thing you could possibly do. Which is why this path of self-love is so challenging for so many of us. Because it's not just an intellectual experience of reconnecting with our real selves and then going out and doing that. It's not just being like, oh, I need to just set some boundaries. I need to just ask people to be nice to me. I need to just say the thing that I actually want or that I actually feel instead of pretending and doing what other people want me to do. It's not that easy. Because number one, when we start to embrace our real selves and what we actually feel and what we actually think, we are going to experience rejection. That is really actually going to happen, right? A lot of people in the self-help and spirituality world want to be like, no, be your real self and express your real self, and then you'll find your people and everyone will love you. And that's usually not what most of us experience. Most of us experience that worst fear that people look at us and go, that's bad. You shouldn't do that. That's not okay. You can't live like that. You can't do those things. Those are stupid values. That's dumb what you think is important. Why are you prioritizing this? That is going to happen. Which is why we need first to develop the adult perspective. Before we are going to be able to get out of this childhood, essentially, I have to reject myself in order to be safe. If I get rejected, I'm not going to be okay. And this feeling that if I am my real self and if I do the things that are really real and true for me, if I set boundaries for myself, if I let myself feel my emotions that historically I've been blamed for letting myself feel, if I don't blame myself for the fact that my body isn't perfectly healthy or whatever it is, if I don't blame my pain on I'm not trying hard enough, I'm not as far in my career as I should be, I'm not thin enough, I'm not pretty enough, I'm not, right? whatever it is that is our scapegoat. We all have that one thing that we say, if this had been better, if I was better in this area, everything would be perfect in my life. If we stop blaming everything on that, we're gonna start to, again, see the pain that we've actually been through. We're gonna come face to face with the rejection and the ways we weren't supported and the ways that we were hurt, and that's a lot to process. Most of us would subconsciously want to stay in the cycle of self-rejection and believing that our pain is because of this one thing, and if I fix this one thing, I would have the perfect life, because we don't want to accept the bigger reality that we got hurt and that real things happened and that we don't have perfect control over life and that we weren't loved and supported the way we needed to be loved and supported. And that's hard, right? So when we start to actually love ourselves, our trauma is going to come up. Our pain is going to come up. The things that we've been through, our real emotions, all that stuff we've been suppressing is going to come to the surface. And if we don't have the adult perspective to help us work through that, we are just going to get stuck in loops of believing we're trapped in it. And then the second thing is, if we don't have the adult perspective that can help us say, okay, even if I'm rejected, even if people don't understand, even if I'm met with, that's stupid, you shouldn't be like that. Even if I re-experience essentially what I experienced in my childhood, where people tell me it is my fault, where people tell me I am broken and shameful, where people say to me, you are not good enough. Now, as an adult, I can be okay. If we don't have that fear of being rejected, or the experience of being rejected when we are our real selves in our adulthood, is just going to send us right back into, well then, see, that's proof that I can't do it. That's proof that I can't live my real life. Because I guarantee you, when you start to be your real self, there are going to be people who don't see it as good, who don't accept you, who absolutely think you're doing the wrong thing, and they are going to tell you. Or, right, we're just going to live with that kind of constant voice in the back of our head of our caregivers telling us that we're wrong, bad, shameful, and guilty, and we're going to be mistaking it for our own voice. You see? So many of us are living our lives believing we are the ones saying to ourselves, you're not good enough, you can't be this way, this is bad and wrong about you, this is a stupid value, you're not allowed to be like this. No one else is in the room, but you feel like you can't live your life even when you're not being observed, because that voice got so drilled into your head as a self-protective mechanism. You didn't need your caregivers to be there anymore reminding you of what not to do. That shame and that guilt and that blame voice got drilled in there, again, to try to keep you safe, to stop you from ever doing the thing that got you rejected, to keep you safe. So if we can't develop the adult perspective that says, I can be okay even if I'm rejected, I can be okay even if people don't understand, I can figure things out, I can learn, I can grow, that fear is always going to take over, and it's going to drive us for the rest of our lives. Okay? So the antidote to the self-rejection is not trying to love the parts of ourselves that we hate. It's not trying to force ourselves to just have a different perspective. It's not forcing ourselves to say, okay, this is bad about me. No, it's actually good. We have to start with, usually, validating and grieving and feeling the pain of the ways we were rejected and not supported and not given what we needed, the ways we were shamed, blamed, and guilted. We need to go through a period of catharsis around the pain we experienced. And this is a part of the process that all people mostly want to skip. Right? We want to just have compassion for our caregivers and not see them as bad and not blame them and not be a victim and skip to the good part where we're just embracing ourselves and everything's fine, and yeah, our caregivers messed up, but that's okay because they were just imperfect people and I can love them and validate, right? We want to keep protecting them as a way of protecting ourselves. Because if we were to admit to ourselves our caregivers fucked up, that they weren't perfect, that there's an existential fear behind that. Because at least if we continue to believe that our caregivers got it right and we were wrong, we then have this illusion of the perfect caregivers, that if we make ourselves perfect, we can then have perfect safety and provision. Many of us are subconsciously afraid to get mad at our caregivers, afraid to actually grieve how they let us down, to be upset about that, to acknowledge how that impacted us. Because that's admitting that I then can't just perfect myself and have perfect safety. That's what we have to let go of. We have to be able to come into the adult perspective that says perfect love and security and safety doesn't exist. It never existed. Perfecting myself was never going to be the answer to making sure I never had pain in my life ever again. And that's a hard realization. That's a hard thing to come to. That's hard to process. I'm not going to perfect myself to get to a place where life is never scary again. So what about reading warning signals from intuition voice to retreat when it's important? Absolutely. That is a huge part of self-love. That's a huge part of actually being able to listen to yourself, right? And that's another reason why we can get depressed. Because if we are rejecting ourselves all the time, we can't listen to our feelings. We can't listen to our intuition. We can't hear that voice of guidance from inside of ourselves. Because we're rejecting it all the time. We're second guessing ourselves all the time. We're looking to the outside to tell us what to do instead of being able to feel into that. Right? So it is this capacity to grieve what happened to us, to be upset at how we were not supported, to move through a process of validating the pain we experienced and how it impacted us, of validating that we didn't choose to reject ourselves. And then letting ourselves be upset about the ways that we were rejected. The ways that our emotions were not validated. The ways that we weren't supported in the ways that we needed to be supported so that we could grow into the people we wanted to be. The ways that we weren't supported in our expression and in the things that we wanted to do. And how that has impacted us now. How that's impacted our relationships. How that's impacted our careers. How that's impacted our actions. We have to grieve that. We have to let ourselves be upset about that. And we have to let ourselves shift from all of this internal anger and blame to being upset at our caregivers, being upset at the world around us, being upset at the authority figures that told us we weren't allowed to be who we were. We have to go through that. And I promise you, you will not stay stuck there. You will not get stuck in anger and resentment forever. But if we don't process it, if we don't let ourselves go through that phase of not having compassion for our caregivers and just being upset, we will stay stuck in self-blame forever. We will never be able to see the real reality and come into our adult perspective. So we have to go through that period of anger. Anger and sadness directed where it needs to go. Then we can start to step into our adult perspective and say, okay, yes, that all happened and it was shitty and it was not fair and it was not my fault and it wasn't okay. And now I can start to see where I am capable, where I have tools, where there are people around me who do love me, where I have support, where the world isn't falling apart, where I can trust that if I just do the things that are in front of me, instead of worrying about, well, what about this, what about this, what about this, what about this, that I do take care of myself. We start to be able to witness and see that I can be rejected and people cannot understand me and people can think I'm stupid or whatever they think, and I can still be okay. And then we're going to be able to start embracing our real selves and doing the things that we've never let ourselves do and learning to love and accept who we actually are. When we have that adult capacity to see that I can be rejected and that my caregivers weren't right about that. Right? That just because I was rejected and abandoned and abused, that doesn't mean that it was true. That doesn't mean that it was actually real or valid. That was a mistake. So anger is just suppressed or not realized energy to create new experiences when I am alone. Could be. Or it could be a messenger from your real self. I'm angry because that was wrong. They shouldn't have treated me that way. And if we don't let ourselves get angry, we can never see what was wrong about what happened to us. And therefore, we can't figure out what is right. If we don't let ourselves get angry at the ways we were rejected, we can't then figure out what was rejected and then what we need to start doing and being so that we can feel good. If we can't let ourselves get angry about the things that happen to us. Oh, the washing machine song. Anyways, we then can't figure out what was wrong with that and why it wasn't good. And so therefore what boundaries we need to set and what we need to start saying no to and what we want to start saying yes to. Anger is there for a reason. It's not just something to feel for a minute and then it's there to tell us what was wrong. You see, if we don't let ourselves get angry and we don't let ourselves get sad, we can't figure out what was wrong. And then we stay stuck in self-blame and shame. Okay? So, depression is complex. This can be a part of it. This may have nothing to do with why you are depressed. Okay? This applies to all people at all times. I want you to see what applies to you. I want you to think critically about this. I want you to take what is real for you and reject what is not real for you and talk about it with your therapist and talk about it with your coach and talk about it with the people that actually know you and take it from a holistic perspective. Okay? So hopefully that was illuminating or helpful on some level. You are not choosing to hate yourself. It is a learned behavior that is a self-protective mechanism, and we have to learn to get upset about it and then come into the adult perspective, and then we can start to embrace our real selves and take action towards doing that, because we'll be able to see ourselves through the very scary reality that we're never going to be loved by everybody, that perfect safety is not going to exist, but that self-expression and doing what is right for us can and will and does feel good. And we're going to start to be able to slowly discover who we really are, buried underneath all that fear, over time. But for some of us, when we first start trying to figure out who we are, it's going to feel like there's nothing there and there's no one there. And we have no passion for anything because we're just so exhausted from pushing ourselves and trying to be what other people wanted us to be and being scared all the time. And that is normal. Sometimes we just need to rest and be upset and be sad and be grieving, and then find a very basic routine that we just do over and over and over again, and just establish a baseline of safety. Like literally go back to being a baby, go back to being a child, and just doing the bare minimum to get through the day and to survive for a little while. That's what we have to do to heal. Okay? So that's normal. But get support if you need it. Okay? So that's that. I hope that was helpful. If you need more support than this, please ask for it. Do not let yourself get into a state where you're considering self-harm or any of these things and you feel like you can just white knuckle your way through it. Get support. If you're really not in a good place, get support. This video is not enough if you're really in a bad place. Okay? This is for the people who are able to kind of work with themselves. If you're not, that's okay. Get help. Okay. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. Sorry for the interruption. And I will see you in the next video. Okay? You are worthy, and there's nothing wrong with you.